Hey everyone, welcome back to Rhythm Railroad. So this is part 8 of my grain facility scene that I've been working on. In this part, I'm going to show you what I've been doing with this retaining wall that you see in the back here. So I figured I'd shoot the video before I complete it all the way, just so I can show you what I do to make it look like this. Now I will say the camera is pulling out the black color much brighter or stronger than what I see here in person. It's not that pronounced. Like this section, for example, is not that pronounced, and some of the really dark sections. But anyways, I'm gonna try to lighten up the camera here so you can see more of like the way I see it. So the way I see it is more like this, even though it's not exactly like this. Anyways, so let me just back up a little bit so you understand what I'm going for here. So what I imagined originally is that this hill that's coming, from the river scene, it's like a huge hill. This was at one point all one large kind of rolling hill here that went past the tracks and went up to like, I don't know, like here or something. And then what I imagine is that this was all excavated and flattened. And so they put this retaining wall to keep the dirt back and also to keep the tracks in place, right? For the slope there that's that incline. And then obviously once you're past the territory of the facility, then it just goes back to whatever it was. Over here, I just imagined that when they made the turnout here and they put the spur in, that they had to cut through some of that rock. So that's why you see the rock cut there. Obviously I have to paint that. But I was able to get a little tan and a little brown on the hill here because the plaster finally dried. But now I'm focusing on the wall. So here's what I did to make the wall. I took some of this 2-inch Homosote spline material that I cut to that 2-inch height. And I put it in vertically. It's just one long strip that goes all the way to there. Then I took a Sharpie from the back and just traced the bottom of, or the top of the Homosote, but it's at the same level as the bottom of the cork roadbed, because I wanted it to look like the tracks were a little bit elevated on top of the concrete. And obviously, once I had it all traced, and this stuff is easy to cut, so I just took a saw and cut it out. So I got the nice, slope. Then I attached it just by using screws. 1.5 or 1.25 inch screws just went in, like just a few spots, just as long as it looked like it was pushed up against the track. Eventually all that's going to be covered anyway. I just didn't want to leave any gaps, any separations, because then the ballast goes in it and you lose a lot of material that way. But once I did that, then all I did was I took like a credit card or a gift card. I had like I think it was like a Starbucks card or a Disney card or something. And I took plaster and just kind of skim coated the whole thing. I went a little thick, not like extremely thick, but a little thick, because I wanted to show, when I made the joints of the concrete slabs, I wanted to show a little depth. So, I did that by carving it out, and this way you're removing material so it looks like it's, actually pushed in, or what it would be if it was a big slab, right? Then once that dried, I hit the entire thing. I just covered the whole thing in this concrete color, which is the Woodland Scenics, just called concrete, C1217. And I use that as a base. So it's basically that color there. And I tried to do it kind of uneven on purpose. So generally no like direction of the brush stroke or whatever. Oh, and by the way, I used a large sponge brush. This way you wouldn't see like brush marks up or down. So I just kind of I just pushed it into the dried plaster, and then just kind of went up and went across, whatever I could just to cover all that. And then once that was dry, I went back and created the joints, right? So the vertical joints that you see there, let me get a little closer here. So you see every like 3 or 4 inches there's a joint, and the way I measured that is just by taking like a block of wood that I had and just pushing it up against the line, whichever line I was up to, and then carving out the line on the other side and then sliding the block over. And that's how I did it. I didn't have to like measure or anything like that. And just went all the way across. I tried to go from this end that way and then from this end this way. This way the uneven slab, which would be, I think it's this one. It wasn't off by that much. This one's a little bigger. Would be behind the structure, so you don't see it anyway. Once that was done, then I went back with an X-Acto knife. Oh, by the way, I made the joints for the concrete wall with a screwdriver, like a thin one of these eyeglass screwdrivers. This thing's not focusing well. So it's got a nice sharp blade to it, but it's still thick enough to create a deeper cut there. And then, for the cracks, I did it with an X-Acto knife because you want that to be real thin, like a real thin blade. And that's just random patterns that I created, just, squiggling the blade along. I try not to make it so that every pattern looks the same, and I also tried to make it in different locations. So if you notice, this one's kind of like, there's 3 here, there's 1 on top, 1 on the bottom here, right? And then this one's kind of in the middle. This one's just on the bottom. This one's kind of like on the right side, but everywhere. So I just tried to change it up every time so it wouldn't look like a repeated pattern or like the same kind of approach. And then once that was done, it looks like this once that's done, which looks nice, but the cracks are white. So I took just some rubbing alcohol and just some cheap paint that I had. This is a Badger Weathered Black, which came with my airbrush. It was free. So I put a little bit in a cup like this, and then just put a little alcohol, well, a lot of alcohol in there, so that it's like a thin, you can see what the thickness of that is. So it just covers, but it doesn't completely paint the surface. Then I took a crappy brush that I had. Try to use a flat one. Try not to use like a fan brush, because I noticed with a fan brush things tend to kind of curve on the ends a little bit. So a straight brush like this is better, because this is where you want to kind of go up and down, right? You don't want to go side to side, because then you see the brush strokes going side to side, and if you would imagine that all the grime and oil and whatever dirt is coming off the tracks, they would streak down vertically. They wouldn't streak down this way. So I actually added a little bit more alcohol because it was starting to dry up. I try to use 70%, but I didn't have any, so this is 91. It dries quick. So anyways, you just take, dip the brush in there, and then you just take it and just kind of go up like this. You're going to see that, it gets lighter really quickly. But the main thing is that you want to try and get into the cracks like this, so that, the black really gets into those cracks. That's your main concern, right? And don't worry if it's like a little off like this, where it's like a little darker on one side or not. As long as you're going up and down, I think it's convincing enough that it's just, the natural concrete, dirt, and also the stuff coming off the tracks. Right, so again, just try to get into the cracks. I find that if you just stab at it a little bit, where the cracks are, it really gets in there quick. And then just smooth it out like this. This actually looks better than the other ones, so I'm glad it's here where it's exposed. And don't worry about if the paint starts to streak down. Again, that's actually good. Just like that. So that's how, as it dries, it gets, to look more like that. But it automatically, I think the alcohol does such a good job with getting itself into the plaster. It like soaks itself in, and then it also creates little, where it finds its way into little crevices and holes and things like that. But again, if you look at concrete, it's never like one color necessarily. It's like, especially like old concrete like this. So the other thing I did just to see if it just created more technique is I went back with plain alcohol on my brush without any black on it. And on the parts that I wasn't crazy about, I soaked the whole thing with alcohol, and then I took a paper towel and just wiped some of it off, and it lightened up immediately. So if there's some parts that are too dark in your opinion, that's a good way to kind of, buff it down a little bit. But just play with it, until you start to come up with your own techniques and how much to actually brush on. Right, so that looked very uneven to me, like almost to an extreme. So I'm trying to just blend it in a little bit more. So that looks a little better. Now my plan next is to come back with lighter colors, so like a gray or like a white, and just give it like little highlights. There's always like little calcium deposits and stuff in old concrete, and that usually shows up as a white or like a light gray. So I'm gonna go back and try to get that effect. But my favorite slab right now is this one. But the good thing is that all the structures are gonna be kind of getting in the way anyway. So it's not like, it doesn't have to be perfect. A lot of that stuff's gonna be covered. But I figured just make it look kind of right all the way through. And then whatever shows, and whatever doesn't, that's fine too. Oh, by the way, I'm not sure if I mentioned this before, or two things. Number one, the reason why I put this foam back there is because I noticed that as I was doing this, I was splashing up. You can see it on the blue right there. I was splashing up the black paint. So, I'm gonna have to go back and paint that again, unless I do a photo backdrop, then I won't have to bother painting. But that's number one. Number two is that before I did any of this plaster work or anything like that, I finished the track by adding the ties that were missing, and then spraying the entire thing with camouflage brown, which I explained that that's how I make my base color, and also that's how I make the ties look a little bit more realistic. That dark brown, very flat kind of look. So I did that before I did anything else, because I didn't want to be like, imagine if I did all this and then I'd have to spray the track. That would have made a mess, and I would have had to mask all this, and it's just a problem. So I tried to do the sloppy work first, then the more detailed stuff. And the ballast is not really going to affect that at all. So once I get ready to do that, it'll be fine. Even if I get a little alcohol running, or a little scenic cement running from the ballast down, it's fine. But I think there's enough surface area here to soak it up. This material, Homosote, is basically like cardboard, so it soaks up the water and whatever alcohol quickly and dries quickly. So anyways, that's where I'm at right now. Like I said, the next step is just to highlight a little bit more. And then I want to also add like weeds and stuff to the tracks. So a little more green. Right now it's just a lot of like dark browns, and I tried to use that earth kind of foam, but it almost looks like a really, really, really dark, dull green. So I want to add a little bit of a brighter green, and obviously I'm going to use static grass for some of that too, especially down there where like you wouldn't get as much traffic as over here. I just figured cars would be sitting back there just doing nothing, and this is where most of the concentration would be for the scene. So that's what I'm going with. Sorry I don't have like professional camera techniques here. Definitely not one of the better videos out there, but whatever, you get the point. And this is just a little project, so I figure I'd just show it quickly. I don't have time to make a big production, so this is the best I could do for now. All right, so I'm gonna leave it there. I'll see you in part 9. Take care.